Hello everybody, it's Katie here, and it's time to talk about the emotional distress that was Shadowhunters Season 2, Episode 12. So first of all, I must apologise for the quality of this video being different. I've had some issues with my camera, so I am having to film on my webcam, and I've never filmed on my webcam before, so this is a first for me. I will be able to use my camera again soon, but I didn't want to wait in making this video because it was such an important episode, so I decided to do it on the webcam. So let's start with this episode. The body switching storyline. It turned me into a complete and utter emotional wreck. I knew it was going to be quite an emotional storyline, but yeah, I wasn't prepared for that at all. So following on from last week, we know that Magnus and Valentine have body switched. Magnus is imprisoned as Valentine inside the Institute, and he's being tortured. Inquisitor Herondale is torturing Valentine in order to find out the location of the Mortal Cup. But of course, it's not Valentine, it's Magnus. So throughout this episode, we get these really painful to watch scenes of Magnus trapped inside Valentine, being tortured repeatedly. There is an agony rune that gets put on him, and it makes him relive some of his memories. He tells Alec that at the end, but in the episode we actually did get tiny little flashbacks to his past whilst he was being tortured. We saw him as a little boy shouting for his mum. Oh my god, wasn't ready for that. No! That completely broke my heart. As sad as it was, I did love that we were getting a bit more of a backstory for Magnus. Well, a backstory in the making anyway, because it went back to his past, even just a little bit. It shows us that there is a lot more to him. And hopefully that was a hint that we will get more of his backstory in the future as well. Maybe longer flashbacks at some point. But it was very difficult to watch because obviously we knew that it was Magnus and that he didn't deserve this at all. In the episode we see him in the prison cell shouting at the security camera in there to say that he is Magnus Bane. Obviously Alec must be listening in because at some point he snaps and walks into the prison cell and he pushes Magnus up against the wall, thinking it's Valentine and telling him to quit his games. And we get this really painful scene of Magnus trying to prove to Alec who he is, and he's recounting memories that they have, and Alec just looks so torn. I have to give huge props to Alan, Harry and Matt for the way this was done, because that scene in the prison cell was so heartbreaking, and as a viewer I genuinely believed that Magnus was trapped inside Valentine. So Alan played the part perfectly, and it was devastating to watch, but I'm really glad that they did it because it worked out great. Meanwhile, we have Valentine trapped inside Magnus. He goes back to Magnus's apartment and finds Azazel there. Azazel offers to switch them back in return for the Mortal Cup. Oh, I forgot to mention as well that earlier on in the episode, Alec calls Magnus for help, and of course Magnus, not being Magnus, acts very strange on the phone. And I love how Alec immediately knew that something was up, so he went round to Magnus's apartment straight away. And I think seeing that Magnus wasn't acting like himself was what made him kind of want to believe that Magnus in the Institute was telling the truth, but he still didn't quite believe it fully because he has a conversation with Jace, in which Jace reminds him that he is Valentine and that he plays mind games like this, and that Alex shouldn't fall for it. So Magnus keeps getting tortured by the Shadowhunters in the Institute, and it comes to a point where Imogen realises that he's not going to share any information, when in truth he actually just doesn't know. They all think that he's playing mind games by constantly saying he's Magnus, so Imogen decides to have him executed. That near execution scene at the end was so traumatic. What I hated seeing as well was Magnus's defeat when Imogen said that he was going to be executed and he started crying. He just looked so defeated, and we know Magnus as this all-powerful warlock, so to see him put in that position where he literally can't do anything to help himself or to convince other people around him of the truth, it was just heartbreaking. The only reason the execution doesn't go ahead is because Valentine has trapped Jace, and they show up as a hologram, and the truth comes out. But it's the fact that it was allowed to get so close that made everything tense. I mean, obviously I knew Magnus wasn't going to die, they're not going to kill off Magnus, but it was still so tense to see that situation and to have Alec not respond. What I really wanted in this episode is for Alec to realise that it was actually Magnus before it came to the execution. And although we saw that he did have doubts and he was very conflicted about it, he was still willing to stand there and let that execution go ahead. If that hologram hadn't have shown up, Magnus could have died. So I am a little disappointed that Alec didn't recognise that it was Magnus. But I understand why he didn't, because of how much they don't trust Valentine. But I am wondering whether that's going to bring up some sort of drama in the future. Is Magnus going to be affected by the fact that Alec didn't recognise it was him? So we will see how that works out. When the Shadowhunters realise that it is Magnus trapped inside Valentine, they send him off to the real Valentine to switch back. Obviously earlier on in the episode we had Alec killing Azazel. Of course he didn't know at the time what Azazel had done and that the switch had happened, so when he went to visit Magnus and saw that Azazel was there, he just immediately shot him with his bow and arrow. And I liked seeing the horror in Valentine at that point, but obviously it was awkward because us viewers knew the truth. But I did actually really like that scene where Alec killed Azazel, because it was no big deal for him. He just got that greater demon out of the way. So I'm proud of Alec for that. At the end of the episode, the two do manage to buddy switch back. Valentine is imprisoned again, and Magnus is back as Magnus. There is this scene between him and Alec where Alec just asks what he can do. And I really liked that scene because it showed that Alec was willing to do whatever Magnus wanted of him. That was his way of comforting Magnus, to just assure him that he was there. And I like that Magnus was able to open up to Alec about the flashbacks that he'd seen. He didn't detail them, but he did say that old memories had resurfaced because of that room. So I'm very glad that this storyline was dealt with in one episode, because I don't know how I would have felt if it had been dragged on a little bit longer, because as interesting as it was to see, I really didn't like Magnus being trapped inside Valentine. So I'm happy that he's back where he is, but I am wondering what implications that buddy switch is going to have. Is it going to make Magnus see the Shadowhunters any differently? Because obviously he's faced their torture now, he knows their torture methods, he has had that agony room put on him and felt what it does. So I am wondering if that's going to change his feelings a little bit. So we'll see what comes out of this storyline. But I am so glad that we were given a plot like that. Not only did it show how amazing Alan and Harry are at what they do, but it really tested the characters as well. So another thing that I wanted to talk about in this episode is Sebastian. We got to see a lot more of him in episode 12. Izzy actually took him back to the Institute. Seeing him in the Institute and seeing the other characters kind of just accept that he is just Sebastian Black from the London Institute, just a normal shadow hunter, knowing what he really is. Oh, it's so frustrating. I am glad that he's been brought to the Institute and met the other characters so early on in this half of the season as well, because I didn't know if they were going to just keep him as a very small part for now and then build him up to a bigger role later, but they seem to be getting him involved with the characters straight away. So I like that, because we get to see him build a relationship with these characters, and obviously they're going to learn to trust him and probably like him. What I did find interesting is that Alec didn't trust him. He was the only one that doubted this boy turning up out of the blue, so I am glad that he was doubtful. But Clary and Jace didn't really question him. So in this episode, he offers to get involved and help with Azazel, because he claims to know things, and the Shadowhunters seem to trust that he knows what he's talking about. So he ends up coming along with Alec and Clary at the end of the episode when the body switch is happening. We got some really great scenes between Sebastian and Clary. Earlier on in the episode, he saw her struggling to draw her rune, and he sits down and talks to her about it and tells her that even though the Shadowhunters say their emotions cloud judgment, she actually needs those emotions to use her rune ability. At the end of the episode, when Clary needs to use her rune to bring down the wards at Magnus's apartment, Sebastian starts encouraging her in his own way. And by encouraging, I mean he tells her every dreadful thing about her life to get her to feel all of these emotions so that she is able to draw the rune and put power into it. And I felt so sorry for Clary in that scene, because you could tell how much it was hurting her hearing all of these things. And Sebastian got really into it as well. He got very passionate, telling her about how she basically had no one, when he kept saying that she was never going to see her mum again and stuff. Yeah, that was quite a difficult scene to watch. You had Alec trying to step in as well, saying that it's not working and that Sebastian was going too far. But in the end, Clary does draw the rune and it works. So after that happens and Sebastian tries to apologise to Clary for it, she actually thanks him instead, because this rune ability means a lot to her. The fact that Sebastian helped her get that power back and helped her to know how to do it more freely, she is very grateful to him. And you can see that she kind of trusts him now, which is a mistake. It's a huge mistake, but poor Clary doesn't know that yet. I never actually put spoiler warnings for the books on my videos, but I really should, because I just start talking about the books assuming that everyone has read them, or at least by this point knows what happens in them. So if any non-book readers watch these videos, then I am sorry for how many things that I've spoiled for you. I'm going to spoil more things now. So obviously we know that Sebastian is Clary's real brother. She doesn't know that yet. I assume he does. After she thanks him, he kind of tries to ask her out on a date. So it's been a while since I've read the first 3 books, but I do remember Sebastian actually hitting on Clary, and obviously I remember what happened in the 5th book when he tried to breed with her. That made me extremely uncomfortable in the books. So yeah, I didn't really like Sebastian trying to ask Clary out on a date. I know that is part of his character in the books, and that's part of what makes him such a horrible and evil villain, but it's very uncomfortable, and I'm wondering how much of that they're going to bring into the show, so we'll see how that goes. So far though, I am really enjoying Sebastian's character in the show. He's very unnerving because of how nice he appears to be. So I'm very excited to see more hints of him not being the nice character that he pretends to be. I think Will Tudor's doing a great job so far, and I will continue to sing his praises throughout this half of the season. Other things I have to talk about in this episode. Simon and Izzy, we got to see them work together again in this episode, and I really enjoyed the scenes between the two of them. I really love how the show isn't rushing ahead when it comes to Simon and Izzy, so I'm happy that it's remaining a slow burner relationship. But I really enjoyed seeing the two of them interact in this episode. Simon asks Izzy for help with Raphael and the whole Daylighter situation. Because of that, Izzy ends up opening up about her addiction to the vampire venom, so Simon finds out about it for the first time. And what I really loved was him talking about his mother's addiction. At first I was wondering why they had decided to make Simon's mum an alcoholic in the show. I didn't know if there would be any bigger reasons behind that, but I think in this season, with him offering Izzy advice when it comes to going to support groups, which obviously he knows a lot about because of his mum, I thought that was a really great touch. And it was also great to see Izzy accept mundane help, because she mentions earlier on in the episode that she's not a mundane, she doesn't do groups. Whereas after the little standoff between her, Simon, and the vampires at the end of the episode, when she nearly gets bitten by a vampire, after that she changes her mind and brings up the support group to Simon. I'm hoping that we get to see more of that, maybe see her at one of the support groups, because I think the Shadowhunters are very cut off in terms of mundane help and medication and support. So to see Izzy actually getting to talk about her problems as opposed to just keeping it in, I think that would be a really great thing to show. Oh, I forgot to mention, when Valentine has Jace hostage and he is speaking to Imogen Herondale, Jace is saying that Imogen wouldn't hesitate to kill him for the greater good. So of course Valentine says that she wouldn't kill her own grandson, and then the truth came out. So Jace now knows that he's a Herondale. Imogen knows that Jace is related to her. We got this really touching scene between the two of them at the end, where she hands over the Herondale family ring, and I really liked this way of revealing things because it's very different in the books. Imogen actually realizes herself that Jace is her grandson, and then she ends up dying pretty much straight away. Whereas in the show, we actually get a conversation between the two of them, knowing that they're related. I'm just really excited to see how Jace handles this. Is he going to do some research on his family history? Because I would like that a lot. Another thing that I forgot to mention as well is Imogen wanting Clary and Jace to be tested to see what their angelic abilities are capable of. It gave us this really great training scene between Jace and Clary. I thought that was well shot, and you could see the chemistry between them. Clary might be in a relationship with Simon, but when they were training together, you could see that they're just naturally drawn to each other. So I think I covered all of the main things that happened in this episode. We didn't get that much Luke in this episode, which I was a bit sad about because I always want to see more Luke. But we did get him walking in when Raphael was trying to attack Simon. When he opened the door of Jade Wolf, sunlight came streaming in. So now the vampires know that Simon is a daylighter. Luke had to remind Simon that being a daylighter doesn't make him invincible. It actually puts more of a target on his head. So we'll see how that unfolds in later episodes with the fact that everyone knows now. I really like the look of the promo for next week's episode. It looks like we have the Clave being very typically the Clave and wanting to track down Welders. So it seems to be a kind of Shadowhunters versus Downworlders thing next week. There's going to be a lot of tension. So judging from that promo, I think next week is going to be a really good episode. So if there's anything that I forgot to talk about, then please yell at me down in the comments. Tell me what you liked about this episode. Tell me what you didn't like, if there were any aspects of it you didn't enjoy. Thank you guys so much for watching and for putting up with the change in the way this video has been shot. I will see you next week to talk about more Shadowhunter things. Bye!